stop. Before you do anything else, just take a breath, because I need you to consider something that most people will scroll right past without ever truly thinking about. Out of the billions of videos on the internet, out of the endless stream of content competing for your attention every single second of every single day, out of every distraction, every recommendation, every rabbit hole the algorithm could have sent you down, you ended up here, right now, reading these words, watching this video, and I don't think that's an accident. I know how that sounds. I know the logical mind wants to explain it away. The algorithm, the thumbnail, the title. But here's what I want you to sit with for just a moment. What if the algorithm was simply the vehicle? What if something far greater than a line of code decided that today, this day, at this hour, you needed to hear exactly what this video is about to tell you? If that thought just sent even the smallest chill through you, if something in your chest just quietly said yes, type the word "here" in the comments right now, because you are not the only one. And if this video resonates with something deep inside you, go ahead and like it. Not as a gesture to a stranger on the internet, but as a quiet acknowledgement to yourself that you are open to what is coming. Because here is what this video is really about. It is about the moments in life that cannot be fully explained by logic. The moments where the right thing arrived at exactly the right time, where a door closed and another opened before you even had time to grieve the first one, where you were lost, truly lost, and something guided you back, not with a map, but with a feeling, a pull, a knowing. Every great wisdom tradition in human history has recognized this force. Every philosopher who ever sat long enough in silence has felt it. And yet, in our modern world, we have become so sophisticated, so rational, so endlessly busy, that we have nearly lost the ability to recognize when something sacred is reaching toward us. This video is your reminder. This moment is not random, and by the time we reach the end of this together, you may never look at the ordinary moments of your life the same way again. The opening segment is complete. Waiting for your instruction to long before the modern world convinced us that life was a series of random events strung together by chance. Human beings understood something that we have almost entirely forgotten. They understood that existence itself is intentional, that every moment carries meaning, that nothing, not a single breath, not a single encounter, not a single unexpected turn of events, arrives without purpose. This was not wishful thinking. This was not the naivety of people who didn't know better. These were civilizations of extraordinary sophistication, astronomers who tracked the movements of celestial bodies with breathtaking precision, architects who built structures that have outlasted empires, philosophers who mapped the inner landscape of the human soul with a depth that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. And they all agreed on one thing. There is an intelligence behind existence, and it is in constant communication with those who are willing to listen. The ancient Stoics of Greece and Rome built an entire philosophy around this idea. They called it providence, the belief that the universe is not a cold, indifferent machine, but a living, rational, purposeful organism. The great Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and rose to become one of the most influential thinkers in human history, taught that every circumstance, no matter how painful, no matter how confusing, was placed before you with intention. Not to break you, but to build you. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and student of Stoic philosophy, wrote privately in his journals, words never intended for public eyes, that he felt guided by something beyond himself, that even in the chaos of leading an empire, even in the grief of personal loss, he sensed a hand at work in the architecture of his life. He called it the rational fire, the animating intelligence that moved through all things, connecting every event to every other in a web of meaning too vast for any single human mind to fully comprehend. Across the world, in the ancient East, the Chinese tradition of the Tao, which translates roughly as the Way, described this same invisible intelligence as a current running beneath all of reality. Not a being that could be bargained with or appealed to through ritual alone, but a living principle of order and harmony that, when you aligned yourself with it, carried you forward like a river carries a leaf, effortlessly, purposefully, toward exactly where you were always meant to arrive. The Hindu tradition spoke of Leela, the divine play, the idea that existence itself is the creative expression of a cosmic intelligence that delights in its own unfolding, that what appears to us as randomness, as coincidence, as the chaos of ordinary life, is in fact the intricate choreography of something infinitely wise and infinitely patient, playing out a story so vast that we can only see our own small chapter of it at any given moment. And then there is the concept that perhaps cuts closest to what you felt when you first clicked on this video, the Greek concept of kairos. Unlike chronos, which simply measures the passing of time in seconds and minutes and hours, kairos describes a different kind of time altogether. A sacred moment, a moment pregnant with meaning. A moment that arrives not according to the clock, but according to a deeper rhythm, when the conditions are exactly right, when the soul is exactly ready, when what needs to happen can finally happen. The ancient Greeks believed that life was full of kairos moments. Moments of divine timing that, if recognized and embraced, could alter the entire trajectory of a human life. And if missed, if walked past in distraction, or dismissed in skepticism, could leave a person circling the same lessons, the same patterns, the same crossroads for years. What the wisest minds across thousands of years of human history are telling you is this: the moment you are in right now is not an accident. It never was. And learning to recognize that truth, truly recognize it, not just intellectually, but in the marrow of your bones, is the beginning of living a life that feels guided rather than lost. So let's talk about what divine guidance actually looks like in the texture of a real, ordinary, imperfect human life. Because this is where most people get it wrong. They are waiting for something extraordinary, something undeniable, something that removes all doubt and delivers certainty on a silver platter. And while they are waiting for the burning bush, they are missing the 1,000 quiet flames that have been lighting their path all along. Consider for a moment the way a river moves through a landscape. It does not force its way through solid rock in a straight line. It finds the natural openings. It curves around obstacles It slows in some places and rushes in others. And yet, despite all its winding, despite all its apparent detours, it always, without exception, finds its way to the sea. This is not accident. This is not chaos. This is intelligent design working through the path of least resistance, guided by a force so patient and so certain of its destination that no obstacle can permanently stop it. Your life is that river, and the force moving through it is not random. Think about the moments in your life that changed everything. The ones you did not plan, the ones that arrived uninvited, wrapped in confusion, or loss, or unexpected encounter. The job you lost that forced you toward the work you were actually meant to do. The relationship that ended and, in its ending, revealed a strength in you that comfort had kept hidden. The illness, the setback, the failure that stripped away everything that was never truly yours to begin with, and left behind something more real, more solid, more essentially you than anything that came before. These were not punishments. They were not the universe being cruel or careless with your life. They were redirections. They were the hand of something wiser than your fear gently, and sometimes not so gently, turning you back toward the path you had wandered from. The philosopher and playwright Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote something that has stayed with seekers of truth for centuries. He wrote that the moment one commits fully to a path, truly commits with the whole of oneself, providence moves too, that a whole stream of events begins to flow from that decision, carrying with it encounters, assistance, and opportunities that no amount of careful planning could have manufactured. He was describing something that every person who has ever taken a genuine leap of faith has experienced, the mysterious way that the universe seems to respond when you respond to it. This is the conversation that most people do not realize they are already having. Every choice you make is a word spoken into that conversation. Every act of courage, every moment of genuine surrender, every time you chose love over fear or growth over comfort, the universe heard it, and it answered. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the way you expected, but it answered. And here is something even more remarkable. The guidance does not only come through the big moments, the dramatic turning points, the obvious crossroads. It comes through the smallest details of an ordinary Tuesday. It comes through a song that plays at the exact moment you needed to hear those particular words, through a conversation that starts about nothing and ends up changing the way you see everything. Through a book that falls open to a page that speaks directly to the question burning in the center of your chest. These are not coincidences dressed up in spiritual language. These are the fingerprints of an intelligence that knows you far more intimately than you know yourself. That knows not just where you are, but where you are capable of going, that sees not just who you have been, but who you are in the process of becoming, and it has been leaving those fingerprints everywhere, all along, even today, even now. Now here is the layer that goes deeper still, the layer that most people, even those who have spent years on a spiritual path, rarely pause long enough to fully examine. Because if it is true that a higher intelligence is guiding your life, then the most uncomfortable question you can ask yourself is this: how many times have I refused the guidance? Not out of wickedness, not out of rebellion, but out of fear, out of the deeply human tendency to choose the familiar pain over the unfamiliar possibility. To stay in the life you know how to survive, rather than step into the life you were built to live. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus observed that character is destiny. What he meant was that the life you inhabit is not simply handed to you by fate. It is continuously shaped by the inner patterns you carry. Your beliefs about yourself, your relationship with fear, your willingness or unwillingness to trust something beyond what your eyes can see and your hands can control. And here is the profound paradox at the heart of divine guidance. It never overrides your will. It never forces the door open. It knocks. It signals. It arranges circumstances with breathtaking precision. But it will not drag you through the threshold. That step, that one courageous, terrifying, life-altering step, is always yours to take. This is why so many people feel stuck. Not because the guidance has stopped coming, but because they have been standing at the same threshold for months, or years, or decades, waiting for the fear to disappear before they move. Not understanding that the fear does not disappear before you move. It disappears because you move. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote in his letters to a young poet something that cuts to the very bone of this truth. He wrote that we must be willing to live the questions, to inhabit them fully, without demanding immediate answers, trusting that one day, without even noticing exactly when it happened, we will have lived our way into the answer. This is the posture that divine guidance requires of us. Not certainty, not perfect understanding. Just the willingness to keep moving in the direction of what feels most deeply, most essentially true. There is also a subtler dimension to this that deserves to be named, and it is this. Sometimes the guidance comes not as an invitation forward, but as a deliberate slowing down, a period of stillness that feels like stagnation, a season of waiting that feels like abandonment. The great mystics and philosophers across every tradition have written about this experience. What the Christian mystics called the dark night of the soul. A period of profound inner silence where the usual sense of direction fades, where the path becomes unclear, where everything that once gave comfort seems to offer none. But here is what they also wrote, without exception, that this darkness is not the end of the journey. It is the deepest part of it. It is the fallow season, the time when the field rests so that it can receive a harvest greater than anything that came before. It is the cocoon, not a prison, but a laboratory of transformation where something is being restructured at a level too deep for the conscious mind to observe or interfere with. If you are in that season right now, if life feels unclear and the signals feel distant and the path feels hidden, this is not evidence that you have been forgotten. It is evidence that something is being prepared in you that requires the kind of depth that only stillness can produce. The guidance never stopped. It simply went underground. And like all things that grow underground, it is preparing to emerge with a force and a beauty that the surface could never have contained. So what do you actually do with all of this? How do you move from the idea that your life is guided into the lived, breathing, daily experience of that guidance, because wisdom that stays in the mind as concept alone never changes a life. It is wisdom that descends into the hands and the feet and the daily choices. That is the wisdom that transforms everything. The first and most foundational shift is this: begin treating your life as a conversation rather than a series of random events to be managed and survived. A conversation requires two things: speaking and listening. Most people do a great deal of speaking through their choices, their desires, their prayers, their striving. But very few have developed the art of listening. And listening, in this context, does not mean sitting passively and waiting for a voice from the sky. It means cultivating a quality of inner attention that notices what keeps returning, what keeps pulling, what quietly persists beneath all the noise of daily life. Start small. Tomorrow morning, before the world rushes in, give yourself 5 minutes of genuine silence. Not silence filled with planning or worrying or mentally rehearsing the day ahead. True silence, the kind where you simply sit and notice what arises when you stop filling every space with thought. You may be surprised by what surfaces in those 5 minutes. A clarity you didn't expect. A feeling you had been outrunning. A quiet sense of direction that the noise had been drowning out. The second practice is one that the Stoics called amor fati, the love of fate. Not passive resignation, but an active, courageous embrace of everything your life is presenting to you right now, including the parts that are difficult, including the parts that don't make sense yet. The practice is simply this: when something unwanted arrives, a setback, a disappointment, an unexpected change of plans, pause before reacting and ask yourself one question: what is this making possible that wouldn't have been possible otherwise? That single question is a key that unlocks a completely different relationship with your own life. It transforms you from a victim of circumstances into a student of them. The third practice is perhaps the most powerful and the most underestimated. Follow the thread of genuine resonance. Every person has an inner compass, a felt sense of aliveness that responds to certain ideas, certain paths, certain people, with a warmth and an energy that is qualitatively different from mere preference or habit. Most people have learned to override this compass in favor of what is practical, what is expected, what is safe. But this compass is not decoration. It is navigation. It is the most reliable instrument you have for detecting the direction your life is meant to move in. You don't have to abandon everything and leap blindly into the unknown. You simply have to begin honoring that compass in small ways. Choose the conversation that feels alive or the one that feels obligatory. Spend 30 minutes on the thing that lights you up, even if it currently seems impractical. Say yes to the opportunity that frightens you slightly, but excites you deeply. Each small act of alignment sends a signal back into that great conversation, and the response, when it comes, will astonish you. And finally, learn to receive. This sounds simple, but for many people it is the hardest practice of all. Receive the unexpected kindness. Receive the opened door without immediately questioning whether you deserve to walk through it. Receive the moment of beauty, of clarity, of unexpected grace, and let it land fully without deflecting it with cynicism or rushing past it toward the next problem to solve. because the guidance you have been looking for has never been far away. It has been woven into the fabric of your ordinary days, waiting for you to slow down enough to. Here is what I want you to remember. When this video ends and the ordinary world rushes back in, you clicked on this video. Out of everything available to you in this vast, overwhelming, endlessly noisy digital world, something brought you here. And if you have stayed until these final words, then something in you already knows what I am about to say. Not as new information, but as a remembering. As the recognition of something that was always true, that you had simply forgotten in the busyness of living. You are not an accident. Your life is not a random collision of meaningless events. The losses that broke you open were not evidence of a universe that forgot your name. They were the careful, deliberate work of something that knows your name more intimately than you know it yourself. Something that sees the full arc of your story, not just the chapter you are currently living through, but the one that is coming. The one being prepared for you right now, in the very circumstances that feel most uncertain, most uncomfortable, most unresolved. The philosopher William James, one of the greatest minds in the history of human thought, wrote that the greatest revolution of his generation was the discovery that human beings could alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. He was pointing at something ancient, dressed in modern language, that the moment you shift from seeing your life as something happening to you to seeing it as something happening for you, everything changes, not just how you feel, but what you notice, what you attract, what becomes possible. So here is your invitation, not a demand, not a prescription, just a gentle, sincere invitation to carry one question with you into the days ahead. Ask yourself, quietly, honestly, without rushing toward an answer, what has my life been trying to tell me that I have not yet been still enough to hear? Sit with that question. Let it live in you. Let it do its work beneath the surface of your busy days. Because the answer is already there. It has always been there, waiting not for the perfect moment, but for your willingness to listen. You didn't click this by accident. And now that you are here, truly here, present and open, the only question that remains is what you choose to do with this moment, because this moment, like every moment that guided you to it, is a gift. And gifts, by their nature, are meant to be received.